Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome. And if you're returning, I am glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. Today, we are doing one of our quick builds, where we'll be exploring a briefly summarized character build for D&D 5e. As always with our quick builds, if there's ever a build you'd like to see me explore in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments below. The concept for today's video comes from 40k Cheese 50, who wanted to see a Dwarf Artificer / Fighter multi-class video. Now, honestly, I really like this idea for a concept, and there is a lot of different sources of media to draw from for inspiration for the character. Speaking of 40k, we could grab some inspiration from the Leagues of Votann, whether we're going more melee-oriented like their Chthonian Berserks, or more ranged-oriented such as their generic Hearthkin Warriors. We could really try to build around a concept that emulates one of those types of troop choices. We could also go full rock and stone with Deep Rock Galactic, trying to mimic one of the core 4 characters who utilizes their mining equipment or weapons to fight off swarms of enemies. In all honesty, I'm not going to draw on any one specific piece of media for inspiration for the concept, but it's all going to be there in the background for sure. Also, when looking at the fact that we can do melee or ranged, given how broad this build is, personally, I'm going to stick with the melee build, but just know that you could, of course, delve into the range side of things by combining the range capabilities of, say, the Artillerist Artificer with the fighter base class, since fighter can do it all. And the last thing to talk about is rule set. Are we going 2024 or 2014? Honestly, this request was from when 2014 was the main rule set, and I did go back and check. I asked if 2014 or 2024 would be the way to go, didn't hear back, so technically I should default to 2014. However, I want to use 2024 rules for this build for one specific reason, and that is the Dwarf. I haven't made a build video from the 2024 rules yet that is specifically dedicated to the Dwarf. Of course, there have been builds where you could potentially go Dwarf, but there's nothing that's specifically built for them. Because of that, I'd honestly like to throw them into the ring with a 2024 build. Now, the nice thing about this, though, is that switching between 2024 rules and 2014 rules on this build specifically is almost seamless. I'm not even going to put in a conversion in the summary because honestly, our level breakdown is the same, our subclasses that we pick are going to be the same as well, and the only things that change are the new rules we would get, like weapon mastery or new fighter features. Those would be gone. There would be some reworking and reorganizing of our feats and maybe the fighting styles we take, but it's honestly not that drastic of a change. I'll mention them as they come up. Of course, the elephant in the room, though, is if we are going 2024 rules, are we using the Unearthed Arcana that recently came out for the Artificer? And in all honesty, no. I'm not going to use it for the build as presented. However, if you were actually going to try and play this type of character at the table, I would highly recommend taking a look at the Unearthed Arcana and maybe using it. It is unofficial playtest material, but it's built exactly for that, playtesting. And really, this build kind of suits that playtest potential. With that said though, for this video, we are just using the classic 2014 Artificer with backwards compatibility rules. Now it's time to jump into the actual build. Starting in character creation with our origin, we're going to be a Dwarf, of course, and let's look at what the Dwarf gets that's new in 2024, since this is the Dwarf video. Number 1, dark vision has been increased to 120 feet instead of 60. That's awesome, it's just a flat buff. Number 2, there's no more sub-races, no hill dwarf, mountain dwarf, etc. We're just one core species. So we're going to get a few features that would have been from different sub-races back in the day. We're going to get Dwarven Resilience, which gives us advantage on saving throws against poison, as well as resistance to poison damage. We're going to get Dwarven Toughness, which gives us 1 extra hit point right away at character creation, and an extra 1 hit point every time we level up. That's great for durability, which as a melee character we're definitely going to want. And then we also gain Stone Cunning. This has been reworked from the 2014 more narrative version to an actually powerful mechanical ability. With stone cunning, as long as we are on a surface of stone, as a bonus action, we can gain tremor sense out to 60 feet. And we can do this a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus. That's really great. Whether we would go ranged or melee, this is really gonna help if we get into a situation where we can't see, but we're on stone. Jumping over to our background now, as far as background goes, we kind of want either the tough origin feat or tavern brawler. It depends on how much you want to actually brawl, grapple, and unarmed strike your enemies. For us though, I think we're going to go more of the just straight durability route, and we're going to grab tough for a lot of extra hit points with our dwarf. Now to do that with the ability score increase we want is kind of tough, pun intended, so we're going to have to either pick an old background that isn't in the 2024 Player's Handbook, or make a custom background from the DMG. Either way, we want to increase our intelligence by 2, our constitution by 1, and grab the tough origin feat. With all that said, we're going to want the following array of ability scores. We want 12 strength, 8 dexterity, unless you wanted to flip it, which you could do, 16 constitution, 17 intelligence, 12 wisdom, and 8 charisma. Again, unless you wanted to switch those two around as well. The main ones we care about are intelligence and constitution. Jumping into the actual level breakdown of the build, since we're doing a 2024 build, we're going to look at each tier of play. Tier 1 is levels 1 to 5, Tier 2 levels 6 to 10, so on and so forth. So, starting in Tier 1, we're going to end up being an Artificer 4 and Fighter 1, but we probably want to start as a Fighter. That way we can pick up a lot more things really quickly and get proficiency in Constitution saving throws. Now with Fighter 1, we're going to gain Weapon Mastery, which really doesn't matter for us for this build. We're also going to gain a Fighting Style. The Fighting Style is actually important, and while there are a few different ones that I would recommend, the top two would be either Defense or Protection. We're going to go with Protection for this one. Going back to Artificer, Artificers 1 to 4, aka levels 2 to 5, are going to get us Magical Tinkering, some Spell Casting, which we're probably going to focus more on utility spells than actual combat spells, at least for this first little while. We're also going to get Infuse Item, which of course we will want to infuse either a shield that we're holding since we have the Protection Fighting Style, or our armor to enhance our defenses, and then we will eventually want to enhance a weapon as well. At Artificer 3, we get that weapon by going Armorer Artificer. We're gonna go Armorer to pick up the Guardian model of our Arcane Armor, and we're not gonna switch it ever, unless you really need to do a stealth mission or something. With our Guardian Armor, we're going to gain access to the Thunder Gauntlet weapons, which we would like to infuse so that way they can be a +1 weapon. We definitely want to use Thunder Gauntlets with the Protection feature because now our tank build is starting to come online. When we walk up to an enemy and we hit them with the Thunder Gauntlets, that enemy has disadvantage against attacks against all other creatures except us. Then, if we're standing next to one of our allies and a second enemy decides to come up and attack them, we can use our shield to impose disadvantage on all attacks against that ally for the round. We are going full armor, shield, and gauntlet, so we're also kind of drawing on a bit of Captain America theme here, just as a dwarf. Going to Artificer 4 now to end Tier 1 at, we're going to gain our first feat, and we are taking Heavy Armor Master. This is one of those things that would change between rule sets from 2014 to 2024. For us, it's a little bit easier to actually pick it up since it can improve our Constitution by 1 to a total of 17, and we also gain a damage reduction bonus equal to our proficiency bonus rather than just a flat 3. And also the damage is going to affect all piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing damage, whereas 2014 only affects non-magical versions. Going up to Tier 2, we're going to end up being an Artificer 5 and Fighter 5. This does mean that we're going to end up getting extra attack twice, but in the end it will hopefully be worth it, considering that we're probably going to want more Fighter levels than Artificer levels, but we don't want to wait a long time to get extra attack. So going up to Fighter 2 gets its Action Surge, exact same thing between 2014 and 2024 version, except that in 2024 you can't do the magic action twice, so no burst spell casting, but we don't really care about that anyways. And after that we're going to get to Fighter 3, which gives us our subclass, and we are going with Rune Knight. Rune Knight, even though it's meant to be a giant flavored subclass, I think maps perfectly onto a dwarf, given that dwarves are usually portrayed as having an affiliation with runes and runic language across various sources of popular media, so I would say that works pretty well. With Rune Knight, we're going to get a couple different runes to choose immediately to put to use. Now honestly, the runes you pick right away don't matter too much, except that we definitely want the Cloud rune, and because we're a dwarf, I think we have to take the Stone rune just for thematic reasons. The Cloud rune is what we're going to be using more often though, because as a reaction, we can invoke this rune when an ally of ours gets hit. Technically it's any creature, but we would probably use it when an ally or ourselves get hit by an enemy. And then, once we do invoke it, that attack, regardless of range, will target a different creature of our choice within 30 feet of the attacker. Let's say we're standing near an ally, but we're not right beside them, so we can't give them the protection bonus, and they still end up getting hit by an enemy's attack. Well, now we can use our reaction to force that enemy's attack to actually target a different enemy within 30 feet of us. It could target us if we just want to tank the hit, technically, but it's probably going to be a bit better to have that ally hit their friend. This does conflict a little bit with our protection reaction, given that they're both reactions, but it does give us more range and has limited uses, whereas protection is always available so long as we are within range. The Stone rune, even though I said we're picking it for more thematic purposes, is also kind of interesting given that it is another use of our reaction, but this one could be more preemptive. When an enemy ends their movement within 30 feet of us, we can use our reaction, force them to make a wisdom saving throw, and on a failure, they become charmed by us. And while charmed by us in this way, they have a speed of 0 and they are incapacitated, which is pretty debilitating. That is a nice way to take an enemy out of the fight before they even get into it, and could be helpful if we don't have anyone to really protect with our reaction already. At Fighter 4 or level 9, we're going to get our next feat, and here we're going to take the ability score improvement feat to improve our intelligence and constitution by 1 each. We've been kind of behind in our scaling because we didn't take the chance to improve intelligence right away, but the way we have come at it, we've been able to scale both our health and attack/damage at the same time, which is pretty nice. Going up to tier 3 now, we're going to end up being an Artificer 5 still, and a Fighter 10. We're just going to go up 5 more levels into Fighter to get more things that we want from them. Immediately we get another ability score improvement or feat. At level 7, we'll gain Runic Shield, which is another reaction-based defense ability, which I'll talk about in a second. Level 8, yet another ability score improvement/feat, because that's what fighters do best. Levels 9 and 10, we gain Indomitable, Tactical Master, and Great Stature. Tactical Master, because it's related to weapon masteries, doesn't matter for us at all unless we're using a weapon, but Indomitable is a nice defensive bonus for ourselves, and Great Stature is a little bit of a damage buff for us, so that's also pretty nice. Now looking at the 2 feats we could take, it's honestly kind of a tough choice. But really what I think I would recommend is just improving both intelligence and constitution by +2 each and capping them each at 20. Get really durable and really smart to just make your stats as good as possible. If that's not what you want to do, that's perfectly fair, but honestly, I think that's probably our best call. The last things to touch on here are our level 7 features we get, which is another rune that we can use, and we are of course going to pick up the Hill rune because we got access to it, and also Runic Shield. Runic Shield is super straightforward and simple. When another creature we can see within 60 feet of us is hit by an attack roll, we can force that enemy to have to re-roll their attack. So if we save this for when an ally of ours gets critically hit, we can just have them re-roll that crit. It does cost a reaction, so it's going to be competing with protection, the Cloud rune, and the Stone rune. Having more defensive features to use just makes us feel even tankier. On top of that, the Hill rune is a defensive feature for us. When we invoke this rune, we gain resistance to piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing damage. On its own, that's pretty good, given that it's kind of like a mini barbarian rage just without the damage bonus. It's even better when paired with Heavy Armor Master. because whenever we take that weapon damage, we're going to reduce it by half first thanks to resistance, and then apply the damage reduction. The idea here is that we are trying to reduce the damage we take from at least weapons as much as possible, while also defending our allies too, becoming a very powerful wall of a character. Tier 4, we are going to end off as a Fighter 12 and Artificer 8. Now, this does mean we're missing out on the armor modifications feature from the Armorer Artificer, so if you wanted some extra armor-based infusions, go 11, 9 instead. The reason I'm going 12 and 8 is to pick up those last 2 ability score improvements, which of course can map out to be epic boons. Regardless of which way we go though, we're going to get that 3rd fighter extra attack, which is awesome. Whether we're trying to do single target damage and just pummel an enemy into the ground while also protecting our allies, or if we're going up against a horde of enemies, being able to provide disadvantage to 3 enemies with 3 separate attacks is going to make us feel like a really strong tank character. And of course coupled with our other defensive abilities as well. Now, let's talk epic boons. Really, I think the 2 epic boons we want most are Boon of Fortitude for a flat extra 40 hit points and Boon of Recovery, so we have an extra pool of healing in addition to our second wind uses and the Guardian model's defensive field ability, which I didn't even talk about. We are a very durable and almost unkillable character who can do this all day while also protecting their allies to an exceptional degree. And besides that, that's the build. Let's check out the vibes per round of this character. Every single round, when we hit an enemy with our attack action, we provide disadvantage on all attack rolls against creatures other than us for that enemy. Then, if we're next to an ally, we could use protection. We then have Cloud Rune, Stone Rune, Runic Shield to provide other reaction-based abilities to protect our allies. There are so many options we have at our disposal that the only downside is that they all require a reaction. We also have a lot of choice for our bonus actions. Like I said, we have Second Wind and Defensive Field coming online really early. After that, we would eventually, at level 20 or so, gain Boon of Recovery for even more healing, but honestly, having those uses of our bonus action for healing or temporary hit points for ourselves is more than enough, especially since we're going to be wanting to use our bonus action to activate our rune anyways, or to enlarge ourselves with giant form, which I didn't really talk about. To sum up that, we have a lot of good bonus action economy, given that we're not dedicated to one specific thing for our bonus action, but rather we have a few resources that we will want to use as much as possible, but in between using those resources, we're using our bonus action for other activatable effects, whether that's a rune, our fighter feature, etc. Let me know what you thought of it or what you would add or change to get closer to the idea of a Dwarf Artificer and Fighter, whether you would stick with the subclasses we did, whether you would go ranged build instead of melee build and maybe try to throw out some actual gunplay, or if you would try Unearthed Arcana with this build. Would you see what the new Artificer has to offer? Let me know what you think. But either way, thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.